There we go. All right. Thank you for joining us today for updates for better hearing in 2021. This is sponsored by Sound Hearing Care, and Jennifer Waddell, the owner of Sound Hearing Care, is joining us today. Also, I have Fane Fisher with Widex, and both Fane and I are employees of Widex US. Let me get my slide advance going here. So Jennifer, I know some of the attendees have met you already, our patients, but some I think are new to Sound Hearing Care. And would you maybe just spend a couple of minutes telling them a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your practice?
Sure. I have 4 locations here in the Greenville area: Simpsonville, Powdersville, Travelers Rest, and Greer. I've had my own practice for 6 years. I am certified in tinnitus. I have worked for many years before the 6. I've worked for a manufacturer. I've worked for a franchise. I've ran a private practice. So I've seen all the different aspects of the business. I've even worked for a third party in Nashville, which was owned by Phonak. So I've seen the different sides and the different angles of the business. And then, of course, I've owned my own practice for the past 6. And I really try to stay on the cutting edge with technology, use the best products out there, use all the new tools, real ear measurements, cognitive view, you name it, I learn it. And I try to keep up to date and do everything the right way.
Yep. And I can vouch for that for sure.
Yeah.
Fane Fisher is also joining us today. She's going to kind of help with questions and provide answers for you in the background. Fane, if you'd like to take a minute and introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. My name is Fane Fisher. I'm the sales manager for Widex, and I help out in South Carolina, North Carolina, and provide support for Jennifer and her practice. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. And I'm Dr. Susan Bondt. I'm what we call a clinical product specialist, which means I'm kind of the go-to person for software and technology questions, and particularly patient fitting, making the technology really work for the individual patient and their, specific needs. So both Fane and I work closely with Jennifer, and yes, I will guarantee she's one of just a few that really put effort into being an expert in the technology and staying on top of all of the state of the art in technology. So today we're going to kind of talk about a kind of a broad subject, how to get to better hearing in 2021. So we're going to throw in a little bit about hearing loss itself, a little bit about what are the effects of living with hearing loss. And then we're going to focus on how technology actually really supports and helps you to resolve or really improve some of those negative effects, the negative impacts that hearing loss can have on our overall quality of life, actually. So just a few little tidbits, facts about the incidence of hearing loss. Among seniors, those of us over 65, hearing loss is ranked as the 3rd most disabling but treatable condition. And it ranks right behind the incidence of arthritis and things like hypertension. So a very common problem. We're going to talk a little bit more about hearing loss in a minute, how we come to experience hearing loss. But there are 3 out of every 1,000 children in the US are born with hearing loss, whether it's in one ear or in both ears. So there are hearing losses that, we experience from infancy, let's say. And so, of course, that can have a huge impact on our abilities for learning, our abilities later on for employment, as well as just, the socialization, communication, and the impacts that hearing loss can have on that at any age, really. So we know there are a few things where hearing loss really does negatively impact our overall quality of life. We're going to talk a little bit about those more today. But obviously it has an interaction with our personal relationships, following conversation, hearing each other at home and at work. And we also know that that interruption in our ability to freely kind of communicate can cause us to isolate ourselves somewhat more. You know, if it's a challenging thing to listen, we tend to avoid those challenging situations, right? That isolation is also linked to depression. It can change our mental outlook. And this is something some of us have experienced during this past year of the pandemic, where we've had to be socially isolated to a greater degree. And we know now for sure that whether you have hearing loss or not, that isolation from friends and family and that social interaction can have a huge impact on our overall mental outlook. So as we get older, it is more likely that we will incur hearing loss. In fact, if we look at the 70 age range, 2/3 of the people over 70 do have some measurable degree of hearing loss. We know now too, from about the past decade plus of studies on the effect of hearing loss and living with hearing loss that's not being treated, that even a mild degree of hearing loss can age our brain. There's an equivalent of about a 7-year potential decline in our brain function, what we call cognitive function. That's how quickly do we process things, how good is our kind of immediate working memory. We know that mild hearing loss can have an impact of causing our brain to work harder and aging our brain more quickly. And we know as we get older that those with hearing loss do have a higher risk of this kind of cognitive impact. In fact, about a 24% higher risk. And as I mentioned before, we now have studies that show that the isolation from living with hearing loss also has the potential to be related to cognitive impairment. Again, slowing our brain function down, impairing our auditory memory in particular. So just to kind of reference some of these recent studies in hearing and cognition, I want to just point out there are 3 that I think are more recent and very pertinent to what we're talking about today. So in the Livingston study published in the Lancet, this was in 2017, it identified hearing loss as one of 9 modifiable risk factors that show evidence of contributing to dementia. Some of those other risk factors were like midlife hypertension as a risk factor, diabetes as a risk factor, a lack of physical activity. Smoking can contribute to an increased risk of dementia. But of course, hearing loss and that social isolation also has a risk for increasing the potential of cognitive decline. But the key word here is modifiable. All of these things are things you can take action about to slow down and lessen this risk. You can start today. The Lancet Commission also published just as recent as 2020 that 40% of dementia-related cases, 40% of dementia is modifiable. And hearing loss as one of the most easily modified, although significant risk factor, and found that the use of hearing instruments, the use of hearing technology to restore your hearing to more normalized kinds of levels can have a very positive impact on slowing down brain aging. And then one other that was by Jafari, published in 2019, that hearing loss was associated with a multitude of negative health outcomes. And some of those other outcomes were overall general health being poor, reduced quality of life, lower level activities, and that's probably related to that social isolation. So there are a number of studies now that really do support the fact that it's worthwhile to learn all you can about hearing loss if you feel like you're experiencing the beginning stages of hearing loss, or if you already know you have hearing loss, maybe you've been wearing hearing aids, understanding why the use of those hearing aids and then how well the hearing aids function to benefit you to get you back into those social situations is really key. So most people do complain either at the beginning or as we get older that the biggest difficulty is, you know, everybody's talking, but I can't hear a noise. I can't understand the conversation and noise. That's usually like the number one kind of complaint when people come in for that, maybe even that first baseline hearing test. That's what they're beginning to notice. Well, here's some interesting information as to why. So we know that older individuals, even those with normal hearing, require the voice, the speech signal, to be louder than the noise based on how loud the speech or conversation is in relationship to the noise. Speech needs to be louder by about 3 to 5 decibels than for people with younger ears. So even without hearing loss thrown in, as we get older, we need the voice to be a little bit louder to be heard against the background of sound. And then we also know that as we age, our brain begins to need more information to easily and accurately understand that conversation. So the brain needs to have more information, be taking in more sensory input to work properly. And then we also know from these cited studies that if you already have a little bit of a compromise to your brain processing speed, and actually don't feel bad at age 50, even with normal hearing, all other health issues being negligent, we know that our brain begins to slow down. And so our ability to process quickly, to filter out the unwanted sounds and hone in on that conversation, we begin to have difficulties at a relatively early age. I think 50 is early. So cognitive difficulties are more pronounced.
I don't think so.
And this is particularly true when we're in really challenging listening situations. So overall, hearing loss makes the brain work harder. We kind of understand that now, I think. The brain typically does a really good job of identifying sounds and differentiating between what's speech or conversation and what's noise, what's music, what's mechanical noise, even differentiating a bunch of people talking from a single voice. Our brain typically can do a pretty good job of that. But it does need a complete sound picture to hear and understand with ease. It can do a pretty good job of filling in missing information, if not too much information is missing. It can piece things together, kind of connect the dots. But obviously, the more missing information, the harder that activity is. It must be able to understand the sounds that it receives. So natural sound, non-distorted sound quality is of extreme importance to that ease of conversation. And typically the brain does a pretty good job trying to filter out the unwanted sound and again, focus in on the important sound, which is usually that voice that we're trying to hear. But obviously, as we incur more hearing loss, even starting in the mild stages, it makes that effort that the brain is having to put out greater and greater to fill in the missing pieces and to ignore the unwanted sounds. So I want to do a quick little exercise. And if you will, at home, please just follow along with us. I'm going to encourage you to participate out loud. We're going to do it takes about 60 seconds. So we're going to do this little exercise. On this first slide, I would like for you to say the colors of the dots that you see on the screen. And if you will, say them reading from, of course, left to right. Say them out loud as quick as you can. You ready? Here we go. All right, I'm sure all of you did that pretty quickly because that's a pretty easy task. Red, blue, green, yellow. So now we're going to add just another little step here. I want you to say the colors in which the words are printed. So again, you're going to read from left to right out loud. Say the colors in which the words are printed. Ready? All right. My guess is you had to think there for a second to get started. You might have noticed that you immediately wanted to say the word hard, when, over, and, but I gave you that instruction and your brain had to take a second to think about, no, say the color, hard, actually green, say green. Say, not when, say red. Same thing for white and blue. So I layered kind of the task that your brain was having to go through. So let's do one more. And same instructions again, say the colors in which the words are printed. Reading left to right, out loud, if you will. Here we go. All right, I gave everybody a little bit more time there because here's what tends to happen. Now I've layered those tasks that your brain has to go through. And of course, your brain sees the word red, recognizes that's a color, wants to say red, but then has to step back and say, no, the color that word is printed in is green, say the word green. So it tends to kind of slow the group's response time down. This is just kind of a quick and easy way I can give you an example of if I load up the tasks that your brain is having to do for any one, kind of task or situation. If I load up the steps to that task, we actually call that cognitive loading. And this is what hearing loss does to us, even mild loss. It loads the brain with all of these extra strategies and thought processes down to make sense of what we're hearing. And all of those extra energy and effort steps take time. So it slows our brain processing speed down, and it may begin to have an effect on our kind of short-term, what we call working memory, because we're having to process and process and process. So you can probably understand how effortful that little exercise was for you. Now imagine yourself with that kind of effort needing to be applied all day, every waking minute. It can be pretty tiring. So when we talk about the auditory system, we hear with our ears, the outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear, but we understand with our brain. So there's this very connected correlation between the sounds that are coming in and reaching our brain, and then what our brain does to use that information and respond. And that's why, as we begin to understand how connected these two systems are, we begin to understand how our hearing loss impacts the actual physical structures in our brain, as well as the brain functionality. So you might ask if, now that I kind of understand, okay, if I'm living with hearing loss, I haven't done anything to do it. I know that's going to affect my brain to some degree. So how do we measure that part of it? You've all probably had hearing tests before, so you may kind of understand what it's like to go in a booth and sit and listen for sounds and raise your hand or push a button to get an idea of how well you're hearing. But how do we measure that next component, how the brain is using all that information? There are certain things that we do to test your ability to distinguish words, and maybe even distinguish words in backgrounds of competing noise. But the industry now is really understanding this close connection between cognitive function. So I want to ask Jennifer if she'll talk a little bit today. She is, again, a leader in the movement to incorporate this information and understanding what's going on with you and your communication abilities. So Jennifer, if you don't mind telling them a little bit about the CogniView that you're using.
Well, it's a new product that just came out on the market, and essentially when you come in for your new visits, what I'm doing is I'm having you complete the testing before we do the hearing test and discuss hearing aids. And the point is that we all know that the brain and the cognitive and the hearing are all linked together. So what we're trying to find out is what your cognitive and processing skills are before hearing aids. That way we can evaluate where you are today and then reevaluate in 90 days. The interesting part is everyone's scared to take it.
Well, tell us a little bit more about, if I come into your office, what is it going to be like to take this little test?
It's a simple process. I have a room set up. I have a demonstration and display room. So it's quiet. You're by yourself. It's a little screen with a wheel. And what you're doing is you're sitting in front of it. It discusses health issues. It discusses how your hearing is connected to your memory, your cognitive, and your processing. And then it shows you step by step how the test is going to be. And it's a simple test. It doesn't take long. And then you scroll with a little wheel. So that way all different ages are able to do the test. It's not designed for younger or people. So they wanted to make sure everybody could complete it easily. And so you follow the little steps. And then after about 5 minutes, you're finished with the test. And then it emails us the results.
Great. And then how do you use those results?
Well, we see when there's an issue, obviously, if there's what they call the green zone, the orange zone, and the red zone. So if we start out in the red zone, then we know there's a major problem. If we are in the green, then that's great. What we want to do is test your hearing and make sure we keep you in the green. Okay, long term. And then if we see that you've dropped off and you have dials that are into the orange zone, then what we're going to do, we know we're starting to have an issue. We need to address the hearing and look at everything. And then what we do is we make sure you're fit properly, and then we have you reevaluated in 90 days. And a lot of times, most of the time, we're pushing those numbers back up to where they need to be. After the 90 days, if we're still not seeing an improvement and we have zones that are down in the severe range, that's where I recommend a neurologist. One thing we also recommend, if you are having cognitive issues, to learn a new skill. So if you have the hearing aids and we're not seeing enough improvement, music is a great way to retrain the brain, as well as learning a new language. You have to get yourself out of your comfort zone and change the neurons in your brain, make them more, I can't think of the word, you know what I mean?
Like
so
reactive, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if you get a little cheap keyboard from Walmart and you go online download something on your tablet and you learn to play the piano, that changes all the activity in your brain. Music's really good for that. So it changes the way your neurons work, and that opens your brain up and starts helping with your cognitive skills. The other thing is learning a new language, because people get very stagnant. And so doing that, as well as fixing the hearing loss and basically just jump starting the brain, makes a huge difference. And then of course, after 90 days with the new techniques, if we're not seeing that improvement, that's when we know we've got to go see a doctor.
Okay. Well, and obviously if I'm learning a new musical instrument or learning a new language, hearing well just is going to be important for the enjoyability.
Because when you're on Duolingo and you're trying to learn all these different accents, it's really hard if you can't hear the S's correctly.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference.
Okay, well, great. So I'm so proud that you're really taking a step into this area, because I think it's really important for any of us that know we have some hearing loss and need to take some steps to treat that, and looking at us as the whole person instead of just the ear is important, I think.
Oh yeah, and getting people out of that element. Oh, it's just my ears that's the problem. No, it's not. It's affecting everything.
Everything, yeah.
Your brain is your computer, and the ears send the signal to that brain, and that computer is not going to work correctly without that signal.
Right, and I know I've kind of pointed out about the whole social isolation aspect to this too, because as we live with hearing loss, we tend to retreat from challenging listening situations. And we know now that lack of social engagement or stimulation, conversational listening and interplay, all of those things actually really help to keep our brain younger and faster as well. Before I move into the next section, I think I'll just take a quick break and ask Fane if we've had any questions come in. If not, I'll keep going. Oh, and you're muted, Fane. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, so how do I, there was a question that came in about asking about appointments. Should we just save that to the end?
No.
Just want to know, how do we go about making an appointment?
Well, we can schedule appointments online through my website, soundhearingnow.com, or you can just call in, whatever's simple for you.
Good,
just
and I do have the
phone or shoot an email.
Yeah, I do have on our last slide, I do have that phone number. And because I don't have it in my memory, Jennifer, what is that phone number real quick?
864-881-1663. 864-881-1663.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead. What do we do now? Now that we have all this very helpful information, I want to focus now on the hearing technology aspect of it. And I love this picture because it wasn't in that long ago, not the very, very, very distant past. It was pretty recently that we used all of these types of technology for entertainment, TV listening, music listening. Remember landline phones? So now all of this kind of technology, communication and entertainment technology fits in your pocket, because
Send you some passwords.
it's in most cases it's something that we use within our smartphone, or it fits actually into the palm of your hand. The hearing aids and the phones have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So very powerful technology in a very small and easy to use package, rather than what we see on the left side of the screen. So I will talk, because I do work for Widex, I will talk about the technology that the new Widex Moment, which is our latest platform, what it brings to improving that effortless kind of listening, getting us back into those challenging listening situations with much greater ease. We now know the benefits of that. So I want to just give a quick review of how technology accomplishes these things, and what makes Widex particularly good at providing these benefits. Widex is the industry's first hearing aid to actually use artificial intelligence and specifically a machine learning aspect for both personal sound control and for automatic identification and adaptation to the environments that you are in. Widex is also the only company to have this ultra fast processing capability, what we call the zero delay pure sound. And that's of benefit for those people that have just hearing loss in certain areas. So we want to mix their good hearing with the amplification to help the area where their hearing loss is. And that mixture of sound we want to make sure is reaching the eardrum at the same time. We also take steps to be extremely precise in the way that the Widex Moment is actually fitting to your particular ear. And we now have the smallest lithium-ion receiver in the canal solution on the market. So lithium-ion, as you might recognize, is rechargeability. Let's just take a quick look. In fact, the most popular style of hearing instrument around the world, but particularly in the US and for all manufacturers, happens to be that receiver in the canal called a RIC, R-I-C, receiver in the canal. That's a tiny little portion of the device is sitting at the top of the ear with a very fine wire that connects to a speaker or a receiver that is placed at the opening of the ear canal. These are popular for a couple of reasons. One, cosmetically, they're not easy to see. So people kind of like the idea that not everybody is going to see that they have a hearing instrument on. As far as comfort goes, because they're so lightweight and we're not plugging up the ear, they're very easy to get used to. So typically within just a few hours of having one in, you forget that it's even there. And because there are several choices in the different styles, whether it's rechargeable or has a replaceable battery, there's a lot of options that we can offer that's going to find the right solution for your particular preferences. We still have pictured at the bottom custom in the ear styles too, because some people prefer to have something all in their ear rather than over the top of their ear. So lots of flexibility in different styles of choice. Rechargeability is kind of a very popular option right now. So we have, again, the industry's smallest 312 rechargeable receiver in the canal style, and they simply drop into the little charging unit. A little light will turn on to let you know when it's actively charging and then when it's completed charging. This little charger is tiny, lightweight, easy to travel with. It can be powered either through a wall outlet, or you can power it by USB connection. So many people have them plugged into their computer as part of a charging option. And then it's slim, lightweight, easy to close the lid when you are going to be traveling, or if you want to take it with you. So rechargeability, again, is a very popular option right now. And having something that's super easy to use, super lightweight to take with you when you want to travel and pack up and take it with you, and then super lightweight and comfortable on the ear is real important. I want to talk, though, particularly about the aspects of technology that provide automatic functionality. And really the reason for that importance is because we do live very, what they call dynamic lives. We're in a lot of different listening situations with different needs and intentions throughout the course of our day. And it's important for the hearing aid to be able to detect and adapt to those situations so that we don't have to think about it. I often say, you know, as a hearing aid wearer, you really only want to have to remember two things: put the hearing instrument on at the beginning of the day, take the hearing aid off at the end of the day. So that you can go throughout your day, going from leaving the house, going to a doctor's appointment, stopping off at the coffee shop to have, you know, coffee with a friend, hitting the grocery store on the way home, getting back in the car. All of those different listening situations have very different kind of acoustic environments. And what you need in those situations is highly variable as well. Through artificial intelligence, we can actually train the hearing aids to identify correctly the type of situation you're in by monitoring a variety of different things that could be happening within that situation, not only just volume and pitch of the sounds, but is speech present or not? Is music present? Is there a steady state kind of noise, like when you're in a car, the engine noise and the road noise? And then to react differently for those situations. And to be able to recognize when speech is present and understand that's probably the key thing that you want to hear. So we use forms of artificial intelligence and machine learning to train that automatic adaptivity to be very accurate and to respond appropriately. The end goal being you go throughout your day, you don't have to think about your hearing or your hearing aids. They do all the work for you. So that's a very important feature, this automatic adaptive functionality. So not everybody wants to have a little bit more control, but for those of you that do, in certain situations, want to have your own specific kind of control over that functionality, we have the Moment app, which can be used both on Android and iPhone. And it's like having your own remote control right in an app on your phone. And within that, you have the availability to choose between perhaps different programs that we might provide for you. You have the ability to modify those programs and save them as new programs, meeting your own listening preference needs. So you have the ability to turn volume up and down, to kind of mix sound to your own preference. You have a little equalizer so you can adjust the bass and the mids and the high frequencies to your particular desire. And we have the industry's first machine learning feature within the app called Sound Sense Learn. So this feature makes adjustment even easier. You don't have to think about any of those things like volume and pitch. Basically, when you go into Sound Sense Learn, the system identifies the kind of environment you're in and says, okay, listen to sound file A, listen to sound B, which do you like better? And it might alter some of the background sounds. It might alter a little bit of the volume, pitch. You then choose, oh, I like B better. And you use the little slider bar. So as you go through several of these A to B listening comparisons, you're training the system as to your preference. And within 60 seconds or so, you've kind of dialed in what you need more so out of that listening situation to meet your own listening preferences. So quick and easy, a great and very inventive use of machine learning, which machine learning we're surrounded by on a day-to-day basis. If you've ever ordered a book off of Amazon, you notice they give you a bunch of other books that they would suggest. That's based on your ordering preferences. So this kind of application of AI is prevalent in our world around us today. But this is one of the first uses of this kind of a feature in a really easy to access interface right within an app on our phone. So I want to just kind of begin to wrap up, and let me highlight what a few nuggets of information that I'm hoping have been important for you to learn today and that you can take away with you. Obviously, the importance of hearing is a priority for all of us. And I want to just highlight a couple of the ways in which this is important to us. You know, our hearing is a 24/7 sense. Our hearing never turns off. Even when we're asleep, our brain still actively monitors what sounds are going on in the house around us. That's why every now and again, I'm awakened in the middle of the night as my cat is up on the kitchen counter pushing things off. I'm hearing things drop to the floor. Even though I'm sound asleep, I'm still awakened. So that access to the environment of sound is important, of course, for our awareness of our environment, and can be important for safety reasons. If I'm walking down the sidewalk on a busy street, I want to be able to hear cars approaching even from the back or from the side as I'm getting ready to step out into that intersection, right? So vision and hearing is very important to keeping us safe. The improved connection to your loved ones. We've talked a lot today about social engagement and being active in these conversational kind of listening situations. And we know with hearing loss, we may tend to kind of remove ourselves from those challenges, but we really want you to be able to get back in and get engaged, because there's benefits not only to our brain and our hearing, but of course, our overall mental outlook as well. Being able to hear in these challenging listening environments, even in situations like over the phone, is so important to staying independent. Being able to participate in activities like attending a webinar about hearing, being able to continue to learn and stimulate our brain and keep independently active. Our hearing plays a very large role in this as well. And of course, nonetheless, it helps to reduce the stress on your brain by taking over some of the listening effort, letting the technology take over some of that listening effort from your brain. And this in the end is going to help keep your brain fit and working well and working quickly. So I'll just wrap up with one more slide, and then maybe we'll open the floor to questions. I always try to drill everything down to, you know, what are the three things that you need to know and need to do as we wrap up today, to make sure you're getting the best hearing that you can in 2021. And the first one is personal education, learning everything that you can about hearing loss and tinnitus. We didn't talk a lot about tinnitus today, but that is part of kind of the experience that many of us have with even the mild stages of hearing loss. And what are the available options? So I commend you all, even by just watching today, you've actually taken that first step to learn more. The second thing is to find someone who is an expert in the field. As I mentioned before, that Jennifer really dedicates and commits herself to staying on top of changes and developments in technology. And that's no small feat, because technology changes very rapidly today. So to stay on top of what's the best technology available out there requires, like I said, a real commitment. And then third, to schedule an appointment, take advantage of that opportunity to talk with Jennifer, consult with her about your particular needs, your particular situation, your particular hearing problems, and maybe even have an opportunity to listen to what the technology sounds like and get an idea of what it can do to make that situational listening so much easier. So as I promised, there is the phone number that we gave out earlier, 864-881-1663. And check out Jennifer's website at soundhearingnow.com. You can schedule an appointment through there as well. But I would venture to say, if you are kind of interested, if you want to even type into the question and answer to Thane, that you would be interested to have someone call you to see about scheduling a time to come in and have a chat with Jennifer. She'd be happy to pass that on as well. So Jennifer, anything else that you want to cover? Anything that I missed today?
It's a lot of information. I'm trying to think here. I think just the key is accepting that you need help and that, you know, not everybody's got perfect ears, and we all need help from time to time, and not to fight it. The longer you fight not dealing with the hearing loss, the worse it gets and the harder it is to fix. And we have the technology and the God-given abilities, and the technology works. So go with it, roll with it, be proud of it. He said, look what this cool stuff I just got is, you know, no, don't be intimidated by technology. I think that's a big thing right now, is that sometimes as we get older, we freak out trying to learn new things. And all this technology can be overwhelming, and you just give up before you even get started. And there's all types of tutorials on YouTube. I mean, I have the patience of Job when it comes to trying to help my patients, trying to learn these things and show them. So, you know, all you have to do is ask, and I'll take the time to help you. But I think not giving up and just being willing and open and being in the right mindset to say, okay, let's conquer this. Let's tackle this. Let's fix it. Let's learn something new.
Thank you.
And then,
Yeah,
then
that's great.
And then that's the key, just being open.
I think that's great advice. And, you know, for a lot of people, they kind of put things off because they're a little concerned about people will know that I have hearing aids. In many cases, the hearing loss itself is much more noticeable than the hearing aid. And, you know, there's like 50 million Americans with hearing loss. And more of those are taking steps to kind of address those hearing needs earlier and earlier. So everywhere I go, and I'm very aware of it because I look to see what people are wearing. But, you know, nowadays, gosh, you know, almost I live in Florida, so it is an older community. Yeah, you know, everybody has hearing instruments. So it's
well,
like,
they're here everywhere here too, because everybody's retiring here, so you see them everywhere as well. But honestly, nobody cares. It's a stigmatism with ourselves and a mental thing. It's as far as everyone else is concerned, they just don't want to have to repeat themselves 3 times to you. So they would love it if you wore hearing aids.
Yeah, exactly right.
So no one really cares.
And Fane, were there any other questions from the group?
No, there were no other questions, and there was no other questions in the box. But I think this is just such great information, and I think as patients become more involved, you know, where they go back to having social interactions, this will give them, you know, wearing devices certainly, you know, help them stay connected to their loved ones where they've missed out on so much. So I just thought I would just add that to it too. So,
I think that's great. Well, thanks everybody. We'll wrap up now. Please feel free. You will hopefully be contacted too in the webinar follow-up. So we'll make sure that you have Jennifer's email address. But please do feel free. We really appreciate you joining us today. And
I hope to see all of you at my office.
Hope so too. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.